When I moved back into Mrs. Max, I didn't just gain a room, I gained a secret little world. And the moments I looked forward to the most were when Mrs. Mack was away visiting family, leaving the flat completely to myself. One cold Friday in November, she left for an extended weekend to visit cousins in Paisley. Seizing the opportunity, I decided to skip my classes and spend the day indulging in my idea of elegance. I started with a long, leisurely bath, soaking in clouds of scented bath salts. Afterward, I dried off, spritzed a little cheap perfume, and prepared to dress up in style. I chose a soft white top, carefully padded to fit, along with matching pieces, a supportive half-slip and smooth stockings. Then I selected one of my favorite outfits, a pale green dress with a square neckline, little bows on the bodice, and slightly puffed sleeves. The skirt was wonderfully full, needing layers of petticoats to achieve its shape. Getting the look just right took time, adjusting the fit, brushing my hair, and lightly applying some makeup until I felt complete. Once dressed, I slipped on a pair of patent leather shoes with a small heel and spent the afternoon quietly enjoying the feeling of transformation, walking gracefully around the flat and playing at being the lady of the house. A few weeks earlier, I had bought a bottle of sherry with part of my student grant, and it seemed fitting to enjoy a small glass as I relaxed. Later in the afternoon, feeling lightheaded but happy, I decided it was time to do some necessary chores. Since the communal laundry, the steamy, wasn't really an option for personal items, I washed my delicates by hand in the kitchen basin and hung them carefully to dry before the fire. After tidying up, I set about making myself a pot of tea. Just as the kettle was about to boil, the doorbell rang. At first, I thought nothing of it, likely the stair cleaner, I assumed, coming for her weekly fee. I wiped most of the makeup from my face, threw a towel around my neck, and cautiously opened the door just a crack. Standing there was a slim young woman, dripping wet in a long black raincoat and holding a suitcase. She smiled and extended her hand. "Hello," she said. "I'm Fiona." "Yes, what can I do for you?" I asked awkwardly. "Well, I'm Fiona Beavers, Mrs. McPherson's niece. I know I'm late. The train was delayed. You're expecting me, right?" "No," I stammered. "Well, I'm here now," she said briskly. She stepped past me into the hall, removing her wet coat. Through the hall mirror, she glanced back at me with an amused smile. "It's Alex, isn't it?" she said. "Short for Alexis? Or Alexandra?" Panicking, I mumbled something about needing to change and retreated quickly into my room, locking the door behind me. My mind raced. I hadn't expected anyone, least of all Mrs. Mack's niece, and now my carefully guarded secret felt horribly exposed. I quickly stripped off the dress, shoes, and accessories, swapping them for jeans, a sweater, and trainers. I shoved everything else into the back of the wardrobe, scrubbed the remaining traces of makeup from my face, brushed my hair, took a deep breath, and prepared to face the music. Steeling myself, I headed back into the kitchen, determined to act as normal as possible. When I stepped back into the kitchen, Fiona was standing at the sink, drying something with a tea towel. As she heard the door open, she half-turned, tossing her damp hair back in a shimmering wave down her back. She looked striking, her rain-soaked hair catching the light, her features radiant. In her hand, she was holding a pair of spectacles. "Bloody things," she said, smiling ruefully. "They always fog up in the rain, and I'm half blind without them." "I'll just be a minute." "That's quite all right," I said, relieved. "Take your time. I'll pour us some tea." I sat down at the kitchen table, trying my best to stay composed, and she took the seat opposite me. My hands trembled slightly as I poured the tea. Fiona wrapped her hands around her cup and looked at me with a warm smile. She was, without a doubt, stunning, tall, poised, and full of presence, with hair like black silk cascading down her shoulders. There was something effortlessly graceful about her, like someone who had stepped out of a storybook. After a pause, her voice, soft and husky, filled the space. "Well, you must be Alex, my auntie's lodger." I'm really sorry to just turn up like this. But you've no idea how good it feels to finally be here. That train journey was miserable, and I had to walk all the way from Partick Cross. Anyway, I'm Fiona, Mrs. McPherson's niece. She did tell you I was coming, didn't she? I hesitated. Not exactly. She laughed gently and then glanced at me more closely. You've changed, she said, tilting her head. Not that I know of, I replied, trying to sound casual. She grinned. Yes, you have. When I arrived, you were all dressed up like you were heading out. Now you're just in comfy clothes. I ruined your evening, didn't I? Not at all, I said quickly. I wasn't going anywhere really. It's nice to have you here. Would you like some more tea? We sat facing each other across the table. Half my mind was dazzled by how stunning she was, and the other half was frantically racing through excuses, explanations, anything. As I lifted my cup to take a sip, I had an awful realization. My elbows brushed against my chest, and I remembered I hadn't removed the padding underneath my sweater. I quickly put the cup down, crossed my arms tightly, and tried to act natural. I could feel the soft padding underneath, and panic set in. You're not drinking your tea, Fiona said, watching me. Is there something wrong with it? No, not at all, I said quickly. I'm just a bit hungry. Are you? She thought for a moment, then smiled. Actually, yes. I could really go for a fish supper. Those words felt like a lifeline. Perfect. I'll just nip down to the chip shop and get us two. I leapt to my feet, keeping my arms crossed, and turned quickly toward the hall. Just as I was about to step outside, Fiona called after me. Wait a minute. I stuck my head back around the kitchen door. Yes, she was laughing softly. Nothing really. Just, you might want to tuck in your sweater. Your, slip is sticking out a little at the back. I turned and glanced at the mirror in the hall. Sure enough, when I had been leaning forward earlier, I must have pulled my underskirt out from my jeans. A good 6 inches of frilly white fabric was hanging down for anyone to see. I groaned inwardly. What a day this was turning out to be. After the awkwardness of the evening before, I retreated to my room, quickly changing out of the clothes that had caused so much embarrassment. But there was no hiding the redness in my face. I headed out to collect the fish suppers. Fiona, full of energy, wolfed hers down enthusiastically, chatting about everything under the sun, stories about the hair salon where she worked, the new jazz bands making waves in London, things I should have found interesting. But honestly, I was too distracted, half listening, wishing I could quietly exit without further humiliation. Finally, I mumbled an excuse and went to bed. As I bolted my bedroom door, I thought I heard Fiona's voice calling out, Remember, we're going shopping tomorrow. Then the flat went quiet as she switched off the lights. I, however, barely slept a wink. When I finally woke up, it was almost noon on Saturday. My head was pounding. The flat was cold and empty, and an old bottle of sherry from the night before lay on the carpet, a reminder of the strange and uncomfortable evening. Groaning, I pulled on a heavy sweater and jeans and made myself a strong breakfast. 2 cups of tea, 3 slices of toast, 4 fried eggs, and a handful of aspirin. I settled into one of the parlor chairs, lit the gas fire, and tried to piece together what had actually happened. The heat and food soon made me drowsy, and I must have dozed off. I didn't hear anyone come in. The next thing I knew, someone was shaking my shoulder gently. Blinking awake, I saw Fiona standing over me, her cheeks flushed from the cold outside. She smiled warmly and handed me a steaming cup. I bought some Kenyan coffee, she said cheerfully. It's so much better than that chicory-flavored stuff you have. Go on, just smell that aroma. She was right, it smelled amazing. I hadn't tasted real coffee before, and it was a revelation. We sat together, sipping coffee while she chatted about her shopping trip. Her biggest purchase, she announced proudly, was a set of Carmen rollers, which she couldn't wait to try out. After a pause, Fiona gave me an appraising look. Do you know what your trouble is, Alex? she asked. No, I said, wary. Your hair. I instinctively ran a hand through it. True, it was getting a bit long and probably a bit untidy, but surely it wasn't that bad. Fiona tilted her head to the side, studying me. I could fix it, you know. Why don't you go wash your hair and I'll give it a trim? I promise, you'll look much smarter. I hesitated for a moment, then thought, why not? I hadn't been to a barber in ages, and maybe she was right. So, I went to the bathroom, washed my hair properly with the shampoo she had left there, a big change from my usual soap routine, and toweled it until it was just damp. When I returned to the parlor, Fiona had already set up a chair by the fire, with scissors and a few brushes laid out on a small table. It was surprisingly pleasant. Fiona worked carefully, her fingers brushing lightly over my scalp as she trimmed and shaped my hair. It was soothing, almost hypnotic. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the gentle rhythm of her touch lull me into a relaxed daze. At some point, I must have dozed off again. The next thing I knew, Fiona was pressing a mirror into my hands. All done, she said brightly. You can look now. What do you think? When I finally looked into the mirror, I wasn't sure what to think. My usually messy blonde hair, which normally hung in untidy strands around my ears, was now transformed into a sleek flip cut, curling neatly outwards at my cheekbones. It looked, well, very different. Very polished. Very feminine. I choked out. What have you done? I styled your hair, Fiona said brightly. Mind you, I had to build up a lot of volume. I think I used almost a whole bottle of hairspray. You did what? I just made it look proper, silly, she said, pouting slightly. Don't you think it suits you? She added in a little hurt voice. Well, what could I say? I didn't want to hurt her feelings. It's rather nice. Thanks, Fiona, I managed. She clapped her hands. Great. After all, you couldn't go out tonight looking the way you did before. Wait, what do you mean, go out tonight? Fiona rolled her eyes. Alex, were you not listening? I told you I managed to get us 2 tickets for the show at the Alhambra tonight. Come on, there isn't much time. Get changed and meet me in the hall in 15 minutes. After she disappeared, the panic set in. This was a terrible idea. It was one thing to indulge in make-believe safely at home, but actually going out was a whole different story. Still, she had already bought the tickets. And maybe, just maybe, if I tucked my new hairstyle under a beret and wore my duffel coat, I could slip by unnoticed. I threw on my old coat, jammed a beret onto my head, pushed my hair underneath, and waited nervously in the hallway. When Fiona saw me, she gave me a long, skeptical look. You're not seriously planning to go out like that? She asked, eyebrows raised. What's wrong with these clothes? I protested. Sure, the duffel coat had seen better days, and maybe the jeans and jumper were a little too casual, but they were clean enough. How about everything? She replied, hands on hips. You can't expect me to go out with you after all the trouble I went to. You need to wear something smart. But these are the only clothes I have. Nonsense, she said firmly. What about that nice dress you were wearing when I arrived? Panic surged again. Obviously, I'd have to explain, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Instead, I stumbled out. I can't. It's, stained. Undeterred, Fiona said. Well, you've got a wardrobe full of lovely things, I've seen them. My heart sank. She must have peeked into my room, and I could have sworn I had locked the door. They're not actually mine, I stammered. They belong to a previous tenant who hasn't come back for them yet. Fiona didn't buy it for a second. Well, I'm sure she wouldn't mind, she said breezily, pushing past me into my room and flinging open the wardrobe. She began rifling through the dresses. She cried triumphantly, holding up a pink gingham frock. Just your size. In truth, it was one of my favorites, but I couldn't admit that. It's too low-cut at the front, I objected quickly. Honestly, Fiona, I couldn't wear that. Fiona gave me a puzzled look, her eyes flicking to my chest as if trying to piece things together. After a moment's pause, her expression cleared. Oh, she said with a mischievous smile. I get it. You were wearing extra padding last night, weren't you? I flushed. Well, never mind, she said, cheerfully moving on. You're right, this one's not ideal. Let's find something with a higher neckline. And so the search continued. I found objections for dress after dress, and soon the bed was piled high with outfits. But Fiona was not giving up easily. At last, she stood before me, frustrated but determined, holding up the final 2 dresses. Look, she said, shaking them slightly for emphasis. You are wearing one of these. Choose.